My name is Emily Parker, and I'm 27 years old. My life has never been easy, especially growing up in a family where I always felt like I didn't belong. You see, my parents had a clear favorite, my older sister, Linda. She's 30, charming, and the golden child in their eyes.
Me?
I've always been the one in the background, quietly taking care of things and working hard, but somehow never being enough for them. It's not like I didn't try. I studied hard, graduated with honors, and got a good job as a marketing manager. But no matter what I achieved, my parents barely noticed. Linda, on the other hand, could do no wrong. She bounced from one failed business idea to another, racked up credit card debt, and still, my parents would praise her as if she were a genius. Growing up, my grandparents were the only ones who truly saw me for who I was. They lived just a few streets away from us in a beautiful old house that always felt like a second home to me. My grandma, Sophia, and my grandpa, Michael, had a way of making me feel valued. Grandma would always say, "Emily, you're the one who holds this family together, even if they don't realize it." Her words kept me going on the tough days. But everything changed when my grandparents passed away last year. Losing them was heartbreaking, but what came next was even worse. My parents and Linda quickly shifted their focus to one thing, the inheritance. I overheard bits of their conversations where they casually talked about how the house, the savings, and everything else would obviously go to Linda. "They'll leave it to me. I'm the oldest, and Emily doesn't really need it," Linda said once, laughing as if it were a joke. I wasn't supposed to hear that, but I did. It stung more than I could admit. I tried to brush it off. I thought maybe my grandparents had made arrangements to divide everything fairly. After all, they had always treated me with love and fairness. But as the months passed, my parents and Linda's smug attitudes grew. They acted like it was already a done deal, as if I didn't even exist. The day of the will reading finally came. We all gathered at the lawyer's office, a cold, sterile room with shelves full of dusty legal books. My parents sat on one side, whispering to Linda about how she could use the inheritance to finally start fresh. I sat quietly on the other side, my heart racing. I didn't know what to expect, but something in me told me this day was going to change everything. The lawyer, a tall man with glasses named Mr. Victor Reynolds, walked in with a thick envelope in his hand. He glanced around the room and said, "Thank you all for coming. Let's begin." As he opened the envelope, I caught my parents exchanging confident smiles with Linda. My chest tightened, but I stayed quiet, waiting for whatever was coming next. I had no idea that my grandparents had planned something none of us could have expected. Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat and began reading the will. "To my beloved family, I want to first thank you all for being here today. This will is not only about material possessions, but about the legacy and values that Sophia and I cherished." I glanced at my parents and Linda. They looked bored already, like they just wanted to skip to the part where their names were called. I clenched my hands together, nervous but curious. The lawyer continued, "First, to Linda Parker, we leave a token of our appreciation for her energy and ambition, the antique clock from our living room. May it remind her that time is precious." Linda's smile froze. "The clock," she said, her voice rising in disbelief. "That's it? A clock?" Mr. Reynolds didn't even look up. He simply nodded and kept reading. "Next, to David and Patricia Parker, our children, we leave our love and gratitude. We also leave the $20,000 in savings held in the joint family account." My parents seemed pleased enough with this, though my mom's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. But Linda? Her face was turning red. I could see her clenching her fists, ready to explode. Then Mr. Reynolds paused and looked directly at me. "And finally, to Emily Parker, our granddaughter, who has always been kind, hardworking, and a source of pride to us." My breath caught in my throat. What were they about to say? "We leave the remainder of our estate. This includes the family home, all additional savings, and the investments made in her name, which total $500,000. The room went silent. I could feel all three pairs of eyes snapping toward me, but I couldn't move. Did I just hear that correctly? The house? The savings? $500,000?
Me?
Linda broke the silence first. "What?" she screeched, her voice echoing in the small office. "That's impossible. They wouldn't do that. The house was supposed to go to me." My dad leaned forward, looking as pale as the lawyer's white shirt. "There must be some mistake, Mr. Reynolds. My parents would have told us if they were planning to leave all that to Emily." The lawyer shook his head. "There is no mistake. Your parents specifically outlined these terms, and I have a video message from them to clarify their wishes further." Before anyone could say another word, Mr. Reynolds pressed a button on a small tablet. The screen lit up, and there were my grandparents, smiling warmly. It was a recording they had made before their deaths. Grandma Sophia spoke first. "If you're watching this, it means we're no longer here. David, Patricia, Linda, we know you might be surprised by our decisions, but we had our reasons." Grandpa Michael chimed in, his voice steady. "We've watched over the years as Emily worked hard, showed kindness, and treated everyone with respect, even when it wasn't returned. She never asked for anything, and yet she deserved everything." Grandma added, "We also saw how the three of you treated her, overlooking her and assuming everything would go to Linda. We're not blind, you know." Linda's face was now beet red. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "You're saying they were spying on us?" The video continued, ignoring her outburst. Grandpa leaned closer to the camera. "Emily, this is your chance to build the life you deserve. We trust you to honor our legacy." The screen went black, and the room fell into silence again. Linda slammed her hands on the table. "This isn't fair. I'm the oldest. I'm the one who deserves the house and the money." My mom looked stunned, but my dad was already trying to reason with Mr. Reynolds. "There must be a way to contest this. We're their children. Surely that counts for something." Mr. Reynolds, unfazed, replied, "The terms are legally binding. And there's one more clause. If anyone attempts to contest the will, they will forfeit their share entirely." My mom's face turned white as a sheet. "What? No, that can't be right." Linda, on the verge of a meltdown, turned to me. "You knew about this, didn't you? You manipulated them. This is all your fault." I finally found my voice. "I didn't know anything about this, Linda. Maybe if you hadn't treated me like I was invisible, they would have felt differently." Linda stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind her. My parents sat in stunned silence, too shocked to speak. That day changed everything. My relationship with my parents and Linda was never the same, but I finally felt free. I moved into my grandparents' house and started planning my future. I used part of the money to renovate the house and invest in a small business I had always dreamed of starting. As for Linda, she tried to fight the will, but when the court dismissed her case, she disappeared from my life. My parents tried to mend things with me, but I could never forget how they had overlooked me for so many years. In the end, my grandparents' surprise gave me more than just financial security. It gave me the confidence to stand up for myself and realize I deserved better all along. Life started to settle into a rhythm after that day at the lawyer's office. Living in my grandparents' house felt bittersweet. Every room carried memories of them, but it also gave me a sense of peace knowing they believed in me enough to leave me their legacy. I used the money wisely, setting up an online business that I'd been dreaming about for years. Things were finally looking up. Then, one rainy afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I peeked through the window. My heart sank. It was Linda. She stood on the porch, soaking wet, with a scowl on her face. Reluctantly, I opened the door. "What do you want, Linda?" She pushed past me into the house without asking. "We need to talk," she said, her tone sharp. I crossed my arms. "I'm listening." Linda spun around, her wet hair sticking to her face. "You think you're better than us now, don't you? Sitting here in this house, spending the money that should have been mine." I sighed, trying to stay calm. "I didn't ask for this, Linda. Grandma and Grandpa made their choice, and you know why they did." She laughed bitterly. "You don't get it, do you? Mom and Dad are furious. They're blaming me for everything. They think I wasn't convincing enough, that I didn't do enough to secure the inheritance." I frowned. "That's not my problem, Linda. Maybe you should take some responsibility for once." Her face twisted in anger. Responsibility? Don't act all high and mighty, Emily. You think you're so perfect, but let's see how perfect you are when the tables turn. I didn't like the sound of that. What are you talking about? She smirked, a dangerous gleam in her eyes. Let's just say I have a plan. You might have the house and the money now, but don't get too comfortable. Things can change. After Linda's ominous warning, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was up to something. A week later, I got my answer. A man in a suit came to my door, holding a clipboard. Emily Parker, he asked. Yes, that's me, I said cautiously. I'm from the city zoning office. There's been a complaint filed against this property. We've been told there are unpermitted renovations happening here. My stomach dropped. What? That's not true. I haven't done anything illegal. He shrugged. I'm just here to investigate. If the complaint is valid, there could be fines involved. After he left, I felt a wave of anger. This had Linda written all over it. She must have filed the complaint, trying to cause trouble for me. But I wasn't going to let her win. I gathered all my renovation permits and took them to the city office the next day. The officials confirmed everything was in order and the complaint was dismissed. Still, the incident left me shaken. Linda was clearly trying to sabotage me, and I knew this wouldn't be the last time. A month later, I discovered something that changed everything. While cleaning out the attic, I found an old chest tucked away in a corner. Inside were some of my grandparents' belongings, photo albums, letters, and legal documents. One envelope caught my attention. It was addressed to me, in my grandmother's handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened it. The letter read, Dear Emily, if you're reading this, it means you've found the surprise we left for you. We always knew your parents and Linda would try to manipulate you or contest our decisions. That's why we made sure to protect you in every way. Inside this chest, you'll find documents proving that we had started transferring assets to your name long before our passing. These assets include a separate trust fund, which contains another $200,000. The account is in your name, and only you have access to it. We also wanted you to know that we had reasons for every decision we made. Your parents and Linda may never understand, but we hope you'll find peace knowing how much we loved and believed in you. With all our love, Grandma and Grandpa. I stared at the letter in disbelief. Another trust fund? And they'd gone out of their way to make sure my parents and Linda couldn't touch it. I felt a wave of gratitude and relief, but also a renewed sense of determination. I wasn't going to let Linda or anyone else take away what my grandparents had worked so hard to protect. A few weeks later, Linda showed up again, but this time, she wasn't alone. My parents were with her. They stood on my doorstep, looking uncharacteristically serious. Emily, my dad began, we need to talk. I didn't want to let them in, but I figured it was better to hear them out. Once we were all seated in the living room, my mom spoke up. Linda told us about the other trust fund, she said, her voice tense. We think it's only fair that you share it with the family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Fair? After everything you've done, you think I owe you something? My dad tried to reason with me. We're still your parents, Emily. Families support each other. I shook my head. You didn't support me when I needed it. You didn't even think I deserved anything from Grandma and Grandpa. And now you expect me to just hand over money because it's fair? No. Linda glared at me, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. You'll regret this, Emily. That was the last straw. I hired a lawyer to ensure my grandparents' wishes were protected and to make sure my parents and Linda couldn't harass me anymore. I also added extra security measures to the house, just in case. Linda tried to take legal action again, but the court ruled in my favor. My parents stopped contacting me after that, and I felt a bittersweet sense of closure. With my grandparents' legacy secured, I finally felt free to live my life on my own terms. I used the trust fund to expand my business, and within a year, it became more successful than I could have ever imagined. Years later, I heard that Linda had fallen into debt due to her reckless spending, and my parents were struggling financially as well. They never reached out to me again, and I didn't feel the need to contact them either. My grandparents' love and foresight gave me the strength to build a life of independence and success. And for the first time, I truly believed that I deserved it.